This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Welcome to the James Bond Book Club. Hosted by me, John Bleasdale. Hello everybody and welcome to the James Bond Book Club. Today I am joined by Dr. Brian Baker for another episode which features John Gardner and the continuation novels. We're skipping one and we're going to the third in the series, Icebreaker. And I feel that this one is by some people is considered the sort of apotheosis of Gardner's James Bond oeuvre. But first of all, thank you for joining me, Brian.
Thanks very much for having me on again, John.
We've already done License Renewed. We skipped over the second one, which I'm kind of curious to go back to because I talked to Chris Eales for Spy Who Loved Me, the Christopher Wood novelization, and he sort of gave some teasers about the second one, in which apparently James Bond gets involved with Felix Leiter's daughter.
Oh yeah, I read that actually. Yes, yeah, that's an interesting one.
And there's actually a slight reference to it here that he mentions America and Felix Leiter and his daughter, and then obviously there's a little sort of callback.
In one of the Gardner books, doesn't he also come across Blofeld's daughter?
Be careful.
Yeah, sorry, that was rather ill-phrased. But
Especially because we've just done The Spy Who Loved Me by Christopher Wood, who is also the author of the Confessions books.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I think when I was looking at some of the summaries of some of the other Gardner books, that Blofeld's daughter appears in one of them. So no, it's interesting, isn't it, that the idea of the generational, because they're all getting on a bit, Felix, and that you have to kind of hand it down to the. And in fact, in this book, with Rivka, that's kind of a little bit of a motif, isn't it? Kind of this idea of the generational programming of the daughter into Nazism. There's a kind of little bit of that here.
It sort of ends up being a bit of a problem for Bond generally, unless you do a Homer Simpson sort of thing of just keeping the Simpsons at a constant age, no matter how long, how many adventures they're having, how many situations are happening to them, because obviously you've got James Bond remaining much the same age while all these while history changes around him. Yeah,
no, exactly. Although kind of lots of these books do kind of have this slight sense of superannuation, don't they? The fact that kind of there's no 00 section anymore, and Gardner has clearly kind of updated the kind of the landscape to make it appear as though Bond is actually operating in something which resembles a more modern understanding of espionage. There's an interesting moment actually when I think it's just down to the the monologue scene, but anyway, he kind of von Glöda asks him about assumes that Bond knows everything, and Bond kind of says, and it might be internally, but kind of it's like, who would tell me everything? Kind of security wise, that's a complete no. Because if you get captured, as he always does, there's every chance that he's going to spill the beans. So kind of basically, you don't give him everything, because otherwise, it's just a complete line back to, back to what London is thinking. So yeah, so I thought that was a really interesting moment where the idea of spycraft has kind of developed a bit in the Gardner books. I think it's clearly he's not doing a le carré, but I think there's a much more developed sense in this book, even more than the first one we read, of Bond being put into a slightly more updated spy milieu, I think.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think so too. And there's also a sense that I feel that Bond is very much outnumbered here, in terms that he's surrounded. First of all, there are two women that he has to sort of work around or decide upon. That sort of becomes one of the central sort of problems of the book is who he trusts. And it has to be said, he's absolutely hopeless at that. It's not
He's awful.
it's just, I really feel I've known a lot of people in my time, and I really feel that I can. And it's just for a spy to even have that as a potential solution of I'm gonna go all in with you. It's like, well, wait a minute, can't you like put in a plan B there? Can't you put in some sort of firewall so you're not trusting anyone until you find out?
Well, there's this extraordinary moment where when Paula tells him that she's been with the Supo all along, and he kind of says, "Oh, I took you on face value," and then he kind of thinks, "Oh, hang on." Maybe that's why you turned up in all of these places around the world where all of a sudden she was there. It's like, well, Bond, what
Well, I
that
mean,
blunt instrument.
I know, but I mean that occurred to me in chapter one. To tell you the truth, I was already
Exactly.
reading it and thinking she just happens to turn up and she says she's in advertising, and
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
like, yeah, okay, yeah, fine, that makes sense. Who would lie? You know, it reminds me of Sean Connery in The Untouchables. Who would claim to be that which they are not? Well, a liar,
Well, yeah, that's right. A spy.
criminals. Teach me more about this policing that you do. Yeah, it's a very yeah, I mean, it's always that strange mixture of like Bond needing to be to some degree superior, but also just being a lot dumber than,
Mm,
he's no Sherlock Holmes, is he? He's
no.
no he's never sort of working things out or being a detective really.
One of the interesting things I think is that I thought kind of partway through the novel, really it could have been called bait or something like that because
Mm.
Billy he's sent out there just to make things happen, isn't he? He doesn't really he doesn't really know what's going on all the way through the novel really. There's all this machinery is working behind the scenes until basically it's explained by Paula in the car and kind of in the penultimate chapter. But in a sense that's not his. I think you're right. That's not his purpose, is it? He's not there to solve anything. He's there to kind of be there essentially.
I was contrasting this because I happened to rewatch Doctor No, the movie, and I was sort of contrasting it with that film, in which he very much does turn up and investigate and kind of works things out quite quickly. It's actually, he is the person who knows the most. He knows more than the British diplomats in Jamaica. He knows more than Honey Rider and Quarrel on the island. He figures out what is going on. I mean, it's not Sherlock Holmes level detection, but he's certainly not, blundering about, as he will do in the later films, and as he tends to do in the books.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it just kind of I suppose it kind of it's different to when we talked about the short stories, the Fleming short stories.
Mm.
Again, he's often he has intuitions about things, doesn't he? That kind of he doesn't always work cerebrally, but there is a sense that he's pursuing some kind of idea of what he should whatever the mission might entail. But here, he doesn't even really know what the mission is. He's after von Glöda, but other than that, he's got no idea about Mossad, Tirpitz, Rivka, who they are, what their relationship to him is, and he just comes across as a bit dim.
And the reader is sort of ahead of him as well, because there's
Yeah,
this amazing opening, which I thought was absolutely cracking and very very cinematic
yeah, absolutely.
of the Libyan sort of ambush. These soldiers turning up, and there's this real dark feeling to these neo Nazis. Paramilitaries just showing up with Russian weapons and wiping out selected targets, and you get a real feel of, okay, this is this feels sort of realistic. This doesn't feel like a submarine being swallowed by a tanker, or a satellite, a
Yeah,
spaceship being swallowed by another spaceship. This feels like a genuine risk. And then he doesn't feel I never feel that he's the person you would necessarily want to be sort of facing such an existential crisis. And when he's sent out by M and there's this sort of like, we don't have time to brief you, it's just like, well, hang on a minute, and he shows up and he's like, I haven't had time for a proper briefing, so you'll have to fill me in. And there are these other agents. There's a Mossad agent, there's the guy from Russia and the guy from America, and they're all well, obviously we will find out later they're all sort of not who they seem to be.
Mm.
Um, but they're all much more sort of secret agents than he is, in the sense that they're much more duplicitous than he is.
Yes,
He sort of
they're
shows
playing
up
double games or triple games with Tirpitz, aren't they? Absolutely.
right.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the things that it's interesting that you said that about, we know more than him,
Mm.
particularly as he's not in those first chapters. So we have a much more urgent sense of the kind of the violence that's kind of at stake here. But one of the things I noticed in that first book, where that you kind of there's this odd tick that Gardner uses three times, where he says later Bond would realise that X, Y, and Z, and he only does it once in this
Mm.
book, and it's on page 211, so it's quite near the end, where it's really about Paula, and that's that kind of idea of Bond realizing is kind of not quite so much in this book. We don't have quite the same sense of Bond thinking about things as we do in the first one. Or even if later on he realizes what's going on, here he kind of is like, oh, okay. So I think that idea of the relationship between us and Bond in terms of the reader is I think it's shifted from that first book.
Mm.
That, as you say, kind of. I mean, it would be okay if Bond knew more than us, but I think the book gets a kind of really interesting murkiness because we kind of know more than him. And that
Yeah.
and that I think that really kind of keys into the Cold War thing, because we're in a slightly different, because Glöda sees things in black and white, but we're encouraged not to see things in black and white in this book, and I think that's really interesting for a Bond book.
Yeah, it's definitely all mixed up. We're not, the left and right, for instance. You got the communists, to some degree facilitating the fascists, even
Mm.
if they're facilitating them simply via their corruption. And I thought that was a really interesting thing, that you see how actually the danger of the Soviets might not be in how good they are, but how incompetent they are,
Yeah,
because they're
yeah,
incompetent with a huge armory.
yes.
And that's ultimately, it's their corruption which is going to bring them down, right, rather than their ideological, um, ruthlessness.
Yeah, and it's also corruption at a very low level, isn't it? Because it's the
Mm.
warrant officer or whatever who basically gets bribed. So it's not the colonel or the base kind of commander or whatever. It's just some sergeant who kind of is bored in this terrible place in the middle of absolute nowhere, and so he gets a bit of a bung, and that's
Yeah.
it, and that causes everything really. So no, I think you're right. I think, again, that's a kind of he's kind of shifting that kind of ideological polarity, isn't he, away from the idea that these are all evil and stormtroopers and kind of or you know commie drones, who are just expendable and that kind of stuff. That they're actually kind of quite human and venal or bored or kind of just kicking their heels and that kind of stuff, and that could provide a much more interesting motivational palette, doesn't it? There's a lot more
Mm.
room to play around with, I think, for Gardner if he starts doing that kind of thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And also, one other point as we move along is that the geographical span of this book is the narrowest, I think, of the Bond books we've read so far. Leaving aside obviously the short stories, maybe since Moonraker. It's simply in Finland and across the border to Russia and back again. They Except for the meeting that they have. I'm not sure, where is it? Is it the Canary Islands or somewhere they meet?
Madeira.
The Madeira, right? where they have that initial meeting, which he kind of, it's kind of crazy racist because they're sort of like, I'm going to
Yeah.
leave on the earliest flight and I'm going to have that's Bond's, I suppose that's Bond being a little bit duplicitous and sort of recognizing that he can't trust these guys and he might need to, but he's only really doing that because he wants to drive up.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
Any excuse to get into his Saab.
But he misses the plane anyway. And he has to wait for the next one. So, oh,
God damn it.
damn it! Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I really like the idea. This is like a winter Bond. I think kind of, there's so many Bond settings which are, what Michael Denning calls the pleasure periphery. The tropical Bond. It's colonial, isn't it? Colonial space. As we know, Caribbean and all of that kind of stuff. Well, I really like this. This kind of idea that we're in a place with steeped history. So we had the Winter War of '39, and kind of, but it's a kind of forgotten place in terms of Europe. No one really remembers the fact that Finland kind of fought alongside the Wehrmacht against the Soviet Union in 39-40. It's a kind of very odd kind of lost tributary of European history of that period. And so to set it there, I think is very canny. It's the kind of as well as the kind of the very small geographical limit. It goes deeper, so narrower but deeper, I think.
Yeah, there's a historical depth to it that you don't find in other books. I feel that there's also it chimes quite interestingly with the current moment because I was listening to the podcast "The Rest Is Politics" with Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell, and they, interestingly enough, use this phrase Finlandization of the Baltic, saying that there's with the threat of Russia and Belarus on Lithuania at the moment is being currently attacked by drones and various sabotage operations and incursions. The potential peace deal with Ukraine is going to involve a huge annexation of sovereign territory, then you're looking at a real destabilization of that whole area, which will have which will have real consequences. And it's this idea that you're creating a territory which it will be, in a sense, permanently occupied by the Russians, and that will go back to how Finland has been treated and how Finland feels is very, very aware of that and is very, very. So when I was reading this, I was sort of thinking about the border and how, I mean, also, how obviously we talk of borders and as if Donald Trump can construct walls around all of them, but most borders, even during the Cold War, weren't actually physical or fenced. Exactly, yes, exactly that. And that it would be impossible to do that. It would be impossible, unnecessary, and also absolutely wrong to have those physical borders up there. So that even in the height of the Cold War, you can sort of zip across with relative ease. I mean, they're talking about minefields and there are obvious problems, but it's also not. It's by no means impossible to get across.
And also, you don't always know which side of the border you're on, which is a fascinating thing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And there's that really weird moment, isn't there, where the map has this kind of double that is also another double, where there's the same geographical feature on both sides of the board. So kind of, yeah. So that's right. There's a kind of eerie quality to it, isn't there? Uncanny that we kind of that idea of a political territory is not the same when you get up there. It's different.
Well, Bond works out that there's two bases, doesn't he?
Yes,
there's
right.
two bases because and that's sort of the headquarters are going to be located there, and then there's the double name of the villain. Also, the villain is really, and of course the doubles in terms of the women that go back to an old noirish femme fatale versus the innocent, and
Which again is reversed. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yes. but I think kind of that idea of the it's the flux of territory, the
Mm.
kind of in that Baltic area, obviously, kind of for us, the kind of Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania are, I mean, they're fairly new states, kind of since the fall of the Berlin Wall, but they're also older states,
Yeah.
but they were formerly part of Sweden and Poland, and so there's this kind of politically, it's just a kind of for several hundred years, it's just been incredibly fluid, that Baltic region, isn't it? So yeah, so I think it's a very canny decision to set it in this place where the idea of the border is something which is very much in question, really.
And then you've got multinational sort of peoples like the Sami at that level
Yeah.
who are, who are Norwegian, Swedish, and Finnish, and parts of northern Russia as well, um, who in a sense are people without borders because
Yes.
they're also sort of to some degree might move around with the reindeer.
And it's
Um,
funny, isn't it? Because Finland, I mean, they're not Scandinavian either, are they? I mean,
mm,
the Finnish language group is close to Turkish,
right,
for
right.
instance. So kind of there's this kind of Finland is a kind of a bit of an outlier European wise. It's obviously very, very far north, but they're not associated with other linguistic groups at all, except for Turkey. And so there's this kind of it's a very kind of interesting place, really.
Yeah, it's a good setting. I think that's one of the most powerful things about the novel. Actually, I think it really makes the most of that setting, and part of that is does it deliver on the sort of action beats that you expect from a James Bond novel? And I think that first major moment comes with the snowplows.
The snowplows, yeah.
And I think I kind of like that. I thought that was a really good moment. The Saab gets to do some stuff.
Yeah, no, no, that was great. It was really, really nicely handled, wasn't it? That kind of that he almost he thinks he's going to get away by slewing the car around on the crossroads, and
Mm.
then there's another one. There's a backup plan, and there's other snowplows down the road. But I think that's an interesting one. Is where he gets out of the car. That he can't. It's not like the Aston Martin, where he
Mm.
basically put the bulletproof shield up or get the guns out the front of the car. Here he has to kind of park it and then throw a few grenades. He goes backwards.
Yeah, he sort of leaves it there, locks it, and
Yeah, beep beep.
off he goes. Yeah, yeah. But that does, it gets him out of his comfort zone, and it makes for a scene which is kind of exciting. I mean, there's a minute where you have to suspend disbelief or push it off a cliff. In the how do they corral these plows into position so that they can they're not exactly the most mobile things to have for an ambush.
No, no,
Move them a couple
exactly.
of 100 miles to get him.
Yeah, that's a little bit of sleight of hand, isn't it? Where we're meant to not kind of think about it and just enjoy the kind of the action sequence, really. But it's like you said about the first couple of chapters, it's very cinematic.
Yep.
Kind of you can really imagine what's going on. I think Gardner, again, there's just thinking back to say the car chase around the castle
Mm,
in License Renewed. This has got a much better handle of the dynamics of how you do that in a book, I think.
yeah.
It is it's quite exciting, kind of that, and and the snowmobile chases, they're quite exciting as well. There's a brilliant moment where him and Paul are escaping from the base, and she says, "If you don't mind, James, I'll drive."
Yes.
And she's much better than him. So yeah, so no, I think it is a kind of a thing, isn't it, with the Bond novels is how do you do the action sequences, which is not cinematic in that kind of way or doesn't use that language. But I think Gardner does really well here. Kind of, and just as he did in that kind of the sequence in the town where he's chasing the assassin in
Mm.
License Renewed. He's good at ratcheting up the tension of things, I think.
Yeah, he's a good thriller writer on
Yeah.
on his own account, and he brings it to bear here. And you kind of have to if you can't do this sort of thing, then um, I mean that might be where maybe more literary novelists like William Boyd and Sebastian Faulks come a cropper is that they're
Mm.
not necessarily as there's a certain skill in getting people to be sort of whipping through those pages as quick, because you want to see what happens. You want to have the protagonist in peril. I do think there is, and also I think the idea, the atmosphere of distrust and who to trust and all the rest of it, I think that's maintained quite well in the hotel when he finally arrives there. I almost got a slight feeling of Alistair MacLean, sort of Bear Island kind of Ice Station Zebra atmosphere of, somebody is a traitor,
wrong one.
Exactly, and people are sort of being. It's interesting how that is expressing itself as well in sort of just personality traits that he doesn't kind of like. Someone smoking while he's eating.
It's
like, it's like, of course you can, as long as you don't mind me eating while you smoke.
It's so déclassé, isn't it? It's kind of like, oh my God, who am I working with?
Exactly. Well, and there you have like Brad, the ugly American. He's the loud Bad Brad, as he's known. I was wondering if that's a kind of reference to sort of Dirty Harry or that sort of, those American maverick heroes who are to some degree supplanting Bond as a template.
The one he reminded me most of was the character that Joe Don Baker plays in Living Daylights, the kind of larger than life, not particularly believable. Kind of. He's clearly playing a kind of a role, and his name as well, Tirpitz. I mean, come on. You could have called him Bismarck or, he's got a funny way with names. I think Gardner. They do stick out a little bit sometimes.
And
but you're right. He's completely the kind of the archetype ugly American, isn't he? Tirpitz in this. Very obvious red herring, obviously, because we're meant not to trust him, aren't we? We're meant to kind of think, oh, he's likely the wrong one.
Yeah. It's sort of he's given to you as he's thrown to you as easy bait for you to go, But I mean, but then becomes the good guy again
after becoming the bad guy again under a different name.
Well, that reminded me of Ray Winston in Indiana Jones 4. And there's a bit. The best bit of that not very good film is when he double crosses Indiana Jones for like the second time. And you see Harrison Ford sort of counting on his fingers, trying to work out how many times he's been betrayed by him, which way he's going, and it's so it reminded me of that. It was just like, how many times am I supposed to believe you can turn coats without just ripping the sleeves off?
But I suppose one of the kind of, even though individually they're not necessarily that believable, the fact that they all build up into this idea that Bond doesn't really know what the agendas are of all these people. There might be a political agenda at work, but there's also a personal agenda at work as well. And there's a really interesting moment later where Paula in the car says that she was following Supo orders, but she was also having to follow von Glöda's orders as well. And there's this curious double game that they're all playing, and that Bond just can't really see through. Because it's too confusing, it's very difficult for him to diagnose through the kind of all the multiple pretenses and everything quite what everyone's up to.
And to some extent, they're sort of depending upon him being a bit of an idiot as well, because he needs to kind of blunder in. That's his role, to make their roles convincing, so they can capture him and be. And be loyal hench people.
That's certainly true of Mossad, isn't it? In a sense, that's the kind of the ultimate validation for him, isn't it? Is getting Bond back to Moscow Center. That kind of that gives him the kind of the promotion or whatever it might be.
Which kind of connects to the man with the golden, not the man with the golden gun. What is the Anthony Horowitz A Mind to Kill, which is the sort of I think it comes between The Man with the Golden Gun and You Only Live Twice so he's basically been brainwashed
Yeah.
in Moscow, and then he sort of the idea is they fake that he succeeded killing M, and he's
Okay.
sent back into Russia having succeeded, so that he can kill the people who sent him to kill M. So
Yeah.
it's kind of, but it's really interesting, this idea that Russia's relationship to Bond, this sort of, hate him, but I can't live without you, James. That
Yeah. I
Russia
mean,
has.
it can't be that hard to put a bomb on his car, let's be honest. If they wanted to get rid of him.
2 in the chest, 1 in the head. He's gone. No, I must have him. I must have him. He must belong to me in some deeper way.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah. There is a kind of perverse, kind of romantic kind of quality to it, isn't there? Absolutely.
Oh,
We must, kind of. And I suppose that's true of all the villains, isn't it? Really, that's why you have the monologue scenes, because there's, they can't just shoot him in the head. They've got to kind of explain their motivations. They've got to create a literal bond with him, before they get rid of him, which of course they never can do. So yeah, I think that's really interesting. Those kind of those psychological dynamics, really, that he's of value, more value than he is just as a kind of spy or chess piece. He plays a kind of he kind of plays a role in their psychological landscape, but they can't quite kind of get rid of him off of the board.
yeah. I mean, killing him would be a defeat, because
Yeah.
they would lose all sense of meaning. It's almost as if subconsciously they know that they're in a Bond novel, and if they got rid of him, they wouldn't be in the
Yes, right.
sequel. We've got to keep him around. He's the main guy.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why kind of the idea of turning him perhaps is such an
Mm.
interesting one. That kind of. I mean, obviously it's not in this book because kind of basically Mossad has this. It was mentioned a couple of times, isn't it? This idea of they'll give him a chemical clean out, and
Yeah.
then they'll send him to Siberia or whatever it might be, or kind of somewhere outside of Moscow. But yeah, but kind of that. I think that is really interesting. They'd want to keep him around. You
Just the
know.
idea as well that it'd be a huge feather in his cap, that they must have like a board back in the KGB center that they've got, like he's at the top of the board, like he's April in the calendar of
Yes.
most wanted British spies. Let's get him.
Oh, what a wonderful idea. Yeah.
So in the hotel, one surprising thing is he doesn't go skiing with all this wonderful snow, and
Mm.
there's no recreation. This isn't Cortina. This isn't the Swiss Alps,
Yes.
And he's and it's this amazing. Well, first of all, we have the sex scene, which is it's so obvious what is happening and how he's being manipulated,
Yeah.
and yet you're kind of complicit as a reader, because you kind of want to get your jollies as well, and enjoying the sex scene, but or the foreplay scene, but as part of this fantasy. But it kind of it doesn't make sense to you as a reader. It shouldn't make sense to Bond. And he just goes immediately soppy, and immediately, something about you that makes me just want to believe you. And it's like, what could it possibly be?
It might be
Beautiful
the
lady.
negligee or what's underneath it. Yeah. No, it makes him seem curiously weak, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah, and which is doubled in the kind of the scene. No doubt we'll talk about later. But of course, there's already been one sex scene, which with Paula,
yeah, yeah.
where basically he has it away with half his back sliced off. So kind
Mm.
of. But this is very different, isn't it? I think you're right, isn't it? That's kind of a kind of archetypal Bond pleasure moment, but this is the kind of moment where he's kind of overcome with this. He's undone by himself, isn't he? I suppose
Mm.
by his own sexual desire here, and really completely clouds his thinking.
Mm.
And
Mm.
you never really get that in the Bond films, do you? Usually it's the other way round,
Yeah,
where
it's
he knows precisely it's mechanical and pleasurable, but
the magnetic watch unzipping the zipper sort of thing,
but he's in control. Whereas here he's
exactly,
not
yeah.
in control. Yeah.
Yeah, she's come to his room, and
Yes.
she's made up a story which is transparently not true.
Yeah.
But she's wearing something transparent, so he doesn't really mind.
Yeah.
Um,
No.
And then having set herself up, and I think this is quite interestingly done, having set herself up as a sort of a sentimental sort of thing for him, person, she gets blown up on the ski slopes. And there's this ludicrous scene, and it's so interestingly frustrating that I think it must be absolutely intentional, where he wants to run out into the snow, but it's so cold he has to go upstairs and get his gear. And he asks someone, "Can I borrow your gear?" And they're like, "Get your own gear, you idiot! You know what are you doing about any gear? Don't you know you'll go out there, you'll be frozen in 5 seconds, you know?" And it's just like Bond, who's usually the one with the Union Jack in his parachute, you know, already he's the one who already has those things set up, is completely, you know, all thumbs.
But he does have the rocket winch in his car, which he's very cunningly had put there, kind of earlier in the movie, in the novel rather, to just in case, and given a good description, and even it's got a brand name, so we know that this is kind of an object. And you see, I think I'll just put this in the car, you know, when I'm going to
Which I love
Finland.
I love the fact that Fleming sort of doesn't do that. He sort of sets things up early on in the novels and then forgets to use them. Like, you know, the armorer comes in and gives him a special gun and gives him a huge thing about it, and then that gun is never fired.
No.
It's like, you know, I mean, if Fleming had been Anton Chekhov, we would not be talking about, it's Chekhov's gun on the wall. You know, so Fleming's. Yeah. If it's a gun on the wall, it means that in Act 3, there's guns still on the wall. It's not doing anything in particular.
I couldn't quite figure out why they needed this rocket winch thing to get her down. No, she's on a ski slope, isn't she?
Yeah, I know. I mean, and I've been on ski slopes, and there are like medical people on ski slopes with skis. I mean, it's like saying,
Right.
you know, it's like saying that a lifeguard would be wearing, you know, dungarees or something and not trunks. I mean, you dress for the occasion. You have the equipment. You know, people do tend to hurt themselves on ski slopes on a quite regular basis. So having medical, but you know, the ambulance arrives. That kind of sells it as, oh, this is a genuine thing. But even the like explanations of what might have happened, oh, maybe she went over a mine, are just like on a
ski slope
in Africa, a tiger in Africa.
And then you got this kind of bizarre idea that she's going to grab it, put it around her waist, and they'll pull her down with two broken legs.
Yeah.
Imagine
Just
the agony.
Screaming her head off. Screaming at the top of her lungs.
I just imagine, you know, that kind of scene in The Simpsons where Homer Simpson falls down the cliff and then he goes in the ambulance and then he falls out the ambulance and goes down the same cliff again. So her legs are kind of it's like something at a bottom, you know, her legs are two kind of completely ridiculous angles by the time she gets down the bottom of the hill.
Oh my word. Yeah, I don't know. It's Gardner. I don't know. Gardner seems to invent these problems sometimes that you sort of think it's almost like he's written the problem out and then he's not. I don't know. It's not a convincing. It feels overly complicated.
Yes.
If she just gets blown up and the ambulance turns up and whisks her away, I don't see that as being, you know, we've missed anything. It's not particularly exciting. Oh, thank God he's got that winch. Otherwise, you know, they would have had to got her down normally without really hurting her.
Yeah, no, that's right. I think kind of that it's too complicated a solution for what really needs to happen. Basically, it's just disappearing her, isn't it?
Yeah,
and you can do that very, very simply, you know, without making this scene out of it. But it does kind of, I suppose, it does open the door to that scene later on when she's in the same room as him with the two broken legs. In quotation marks.
Yeah, which kind of is that's another of those moments where you're way ahead of him. Or at least I was. I don't know. How did you feel?
I was. Yeah. It's like, oh, don't Bond, don't say that.
What do you say? So what happened then? They wanted me to tell them all about the secrets. These secrets I'm about to tell you.
And then there's this bizarre moment, which I couldn't picture at all, where she leaps out of the casts.
Yeah,
How the hell does she do that? Has she got
yeah, and
two
they,
springs in the bottom of the boots or something? I mean,
yeah.
it's how can you leap out of two casts which I presume are meant to be propped up? What's
S-
going on?
Spring heeled at that point, you know.
Well, maybe they flip open like ding, and she's able to leap clear.
There's
Very
just
odd.
something inherently comic about the idea of plaster casts on one leg, and then very
Yeah.
very comic about plaster casts on both legs. And as unfortunate as it may be to experience, to see just makes me think this is a comedy skit.
Has Bond ever broken anything in any of the books?
That's a good question. He must have broken an arm at some point or
You'd think,
other.
wouldn't you?
Yeah, yeah. Fingers, certainly.
Right.
I
Yeah.
remember someone breaking one of his fingers. It was like left
Right.
hand.
Yeah. Not in his gun.
Yeah,
Not in his gun hand.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, though it's that scene had me sort of quizzical, and then they're sort of like, okay, we're one person down, but we'll go ahead anyway. Also, the other thing that slightly I was furrowing my brow about was the way they kept having to communicate, and he kept having to go up to the hotel room and back down again because so that he could
Yeah.
communicate with London.
And sweeping the room every time he got there and finding about 20 more bugs, kind of. That didn't take long.
Why doesn't he just pretend to leave the room and then wait?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that is odd, isn't it? Yeah, if anyone was suspicious of what he was doing, then him go popping back to the room every few minutes is not great spycraft, is it? That
Yeah, it's not exactly, and like a ghost, he'll disappear.
Yeah, I suppose there's a clumsiness, isn't there, about him all the way through, really.
Mm,
That's maybe kind of defines him in this book. He's kind of clumsy. He's
mm.
clumsy in his spycraft. He's clumsy in his understanding. Um, and even physically, he doesn't really, when he kind of gets rid of the two kind of would-be killers at the beginning with Paula. But, other than that, there's not much in the way of deft, there's the car driving. But even I said it, even with the snowmobile, he's too clumsy a driver. And Paula takes over, kind of at the end of the novel. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, when they start on the snowmobiles, he's following, and
he is.
he's always making sure that he's a little bit behind and all the rest of it. He's not, uh, he's very rarely ahead of anything in this book.
No.
He's always sort of lurking, and he kind of an element in which he knows that he suspects that the Russian will betray him, and
Mm,
him as soon as he's on Russian soil, he's really in trouble. Why would he trust this guy?
mm.
But there's also a sense as well of why is London putting him in this position? You know,
Yeah, he's been asked for, isn't he?
yeah, yeah,
But you think for
specifically.
London, yeah, you think that you kind of think, they've asked for James Bond, have they? Why is that? So yes, that's right. There's a kind of um, even London's motivations, because I think even at one point he kind of is a bit despairing about M, isn't he?
Yeah, yeah, he sort of gets a bit angry, doesn't he? He's like,
He
what the
does.
hell have I? Yeah, why is he sending me off like this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. But that's quite an interesting thing, isn't it? Considering how intent even these novels are about this kind of bond between him and M and its father-son, essentially.
Yeah.
You know, it's not as though Bond's expendable here, but he is certainly sent off with a very high degree of possibility that he's either going to be captured or killed. And kind of, and that's quite again, that's kind of very interesting Cold War moral grey zone, isn't it? That you see it much more in other kind of Cold War spy novels, don't you? Where Alex Leamas or whatever, that they are very definitely expendable. Whereas, but for Bond to be expendable, considering how much time and resource is actually in him, as the
Mm.
kind of the as the 007, it's quite an odd kind of an interesting narrative gambit, I think.
Yeah, I'm always interested as well in how many double O's there are. There's in several of the books they sort of reference certain double O's, but you always get this feeling that there's like 5 or 6. So, there's not.
Yeah.
I suppose 10 would be the top figure with him in um, or 9 even. Because you can't have, because you wouldn't be a double O if you're a double O 10, would you? You'd be an O10 to keep
Oh,
the 3
well, I
figures.
don't know. Yeah.
Three-figure
Yeah.
prefix, because
Here's
I'm
a- here's
assuming
a-
it's just like the Office extension, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Here's you working with this mission. It's 00210.
Yeah,
Oh
exactly.
no, there are 200 of us, are there? Kind of Bond on and suddenly realizes he's not so important after all. No, yeah. Or
But
maybe there's a hierarchy. You have to work your way up. You get a different number.
what sort of strikes me about that is why wouldn't London send someone to help him? Why would it be relying on these other people
Mm,
around him, which
mm.
is, as we can see from the plot of the story, is incredibly dangerous, and they're untrustworthy.
Well, I suppose the inference I got was that they don't really want to.
Right.
It's not as though resources are elsewhere are scant, so they can't send him anything. It's just that they prefer him to be out there on his own dangling.
He's all right.
Yeah, that's right. He's Bond. He'll do it. Yeah. Oh, he's been captured and tortured to within an inch of his life in the ice bath. Oh,
He's
whatever.
all. He's always. That's just
He's
a
making it up.
Wednesday. That's just a
Yeah,
Wed-
no. He always exaggerates.
Absolutely, absolutely.
He
So,
was in the hot tub.
but as soon as they get there, they're more or less, things begin to become clear about how how the ground lies, with von Glöda and Kosolov. Um,
Kosolov.
Kosolov, who is, I mean, I don't think that, I think this is a problem with all Bond books. I don't think this is a problem necessarily with Gardner in particular. Is I'm always a little bit distressed by how everyone is so one-dimensional,
Hmm.
in the sense that, Kosolov seems like a villain, and he is a villain,
Yeah.
and it just doesn't, there's no sort of like, I very rarely feel disappointed when someone reveals themselves to be a villain in a James Bond novel. I don't think, oh, I liked him, oh, he's a villain, oh,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
pity, you know. And I mean, like, a really good example of that is Fleming's Blofeld, who is just like monstrous from beginning to end. It's got
Yeah.
no redeeming qualities whatsoever.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose you do have Paula, who we think
Right.
Pop has gone over, probably. Kind of that she is working for the other side. And you got the weird Tirpitz, Buxman, Tirpitz triumvirate in the same man.
Do you think he knows who he
He
is?
doesn't. No, that's why he leaves the room at the end. He's kind of he's being taken away. Um, I am Tirpitz. No. Herr Buxman, come here.
Talking to himself again.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I do see what you mean. I think one of the things that I suppose the sleights of hand that Gardner uses here is that von Glöda is kind of off stage most of the time.
Mm,
Yet there's only really the one monologue scene, isn't there? There's no. It's not like License Renewed, where there's all of the hospitality and there's that kind of machinery of Bond becoming a kind of inside the circle. Here it's much more. He's. I think do we see him twice? No, or just
mm.
once? Is it before the kind of the meeting? So there's a kind of he's kept well in the background really, and I think probably to the benefit of the novel because when he does turn up, he's just a pasteboard Nazi, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and a little bit. I mean, it's a little. I'm not saying that the potential of the neo Nazis is wasted necessarily, but you do get a feeling that the threat is somewhat dissipated when it is just sort of like a her flick from Allo Allo. It's
Yeah,
you want it to be a little bit more. I don't know, somebody who would be less recognizable as a Nazi. I mean, talking about relevance to today as well.
mm,
People who are actually like, actually, they they own large, social media networks, and
Absolutely.
they're dressed in jeans and black Rolernecks and
Yeah,
all
yeah,
that
they're
sort
not
of
wearing
stuff.
Nazi uniforms, are they?
Yeah,
Kind of it's no, that's just cosplay, isn't it? It's just
yeah.
that's just dress up. It's really interesting. I think in that A World for Heroes, where it's the monologue chapter, um, there is quite an interesting kind of idea, which I thought was pretty relevant. Kind of. So it says this is von Glöda. He says the Soviets have penetrated trade unions and governments right through Britain and America, and much good it will do them. The Eastern Bloc is, you'll agree, slowly collapsing in on itself. Last year, we showed the world by a few well-planned operations. This year will be different. This year, we are better armed and equipped. Blah 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 blah. But kind of, it's interesting, isn't it? He's kind of he's outlining, I suppose, a, the idea that there's something corroded inside the political system of the times, and here it's the kind of the Cold War binary. Um, that kind of the West's democracies have been penetrated by communism, but at the same time, the communist world is kind of stumbling towards collapse, and that opens the door then for the potential for fascism not to be a terrorist thing, but to become much more legitimated and become a political force. And I think that's actually quite prescient. That kind of
Mm.
speaks to today quite well, really. That we have kind of sclerotic, kind of onto kind of octogenarians, basically kind of ruling the world, and the systems no longer really work democratically. And what this does is to open the door for the far right to prey upon resentment and whatever. So yeah, I think that, I mean, that's, if it had been put in the mouth of someone, as you say, someone less caricature,
Mm.
as a kind of old-fashioned Nazi, but someone who's perhaps younger, so kind of a politician who probably of the different generation, or even Rivka. I
Mm.
mean, that would have been, say von Glöda was the figurehead and she was really the force behind everything.
That
It
would
would
be
have been much
much
more
more
interesting.
much more subversive as well, because also you've
Mm,
got someone who's sexy, and
yeah,
that sort of funnily enough, the Indiana Jones film, the third one, does that quite well in having the sexy Nazi
yes,
you know confuse Indiana Jones by being,
again,
by being both exactly what he wants and exactly what he doesn't want at exactly the same time.
yeah,
I mean, this is published in 1983, so
mm,
that idea that the Soviet Union is collapsing is, in a sense, as well, quite prescient. I mean, obviously, these are the years in which you've got a series of sort of secretaries of the party who are weekend at Bernie's ing, um, and so there is a sense of this is a system which is to some degree the end of its cycle or its
mm,
lifespan. But when the wall fell in 1989 and the Soviet Union collapsed, it came as a huge surprise. It wasn't like, I mean, it was
yeah,
against the CIA's. The CIA didn't know it, so I don't know how John Gardner um, predicted it. I mean, it was kind of it's a fairly good shout. The other book I would like to compare this to, I've just finished Ira Levin's Boys from Brazil,
oh right, yeah,
which of course has itself a Nazi plot in the it's a sort of genetic attempt to reproduce Hitler, and in doing so, and it's got this brilliant line where all you need are the economic conditions of 1930s Germany and a charismatic leader, and we'll be back. And you sort of think, huh,
mm,
okay, that's not that far away from where we are now.
yeah,
You don't really need a genetic copy of
no,
Hitler as
no,
you need a Bolsonaro or a Viktor Orban or oh God, they're too long. It would take us too long to list.
yeah,
Um, and the thing that book is in, that book's 1976, and so it's very much, you know, Nazi hunters and Nazis who are in their 60s
mm,
are the main characters. This is now a few years later, less than 10 years later, And I feel you're already getting the feeling that that generation of sort of Nazis who were in the war are beginning to be a little bit too old to, to even have a future that they're going to,
Yeah,
we will see the Fourth Reich, you know. When Mengele says we will see the Fourth Reich in the 70s, you're sort of thinking, oh, well, that's a definite danger, you know. Here, I think if it is Rivka Ingber saying it um, rather than Gödel. Your Glöda, sorry. I mean, that's an interesting actual. Is it the uncertainty principle that Gödel
yes,
was?
good. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's really interesting, and it would also make a different kind of point, wouldn't it, about Bond's weakness for her?
yeah,
That kind of that he very clearly falls under her sexual spell, kind of. Yeah, and that would be a really interesting thing, wouldn't it? To think, oh, actually, kind of that there's lots of different ways in which Nazism or the far right can present um, pleasure as a kind of ideological tool.
yeah.
Um,
Wagner and Leni
yeah, yeah.
Riefenstahl and the Night Porter.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. I was thinking about this and about the relationship between the Nazi past and European set Cold War espionage novels. I was thinking about Len Dayton, and I thought there's a really interesting couple of links to Dayton here because
Mm,
Billion Dollar Brain, which is the fourth of the kind of what we think of as Harry Palmer, but the anonymous narrator books, is actually set in Helsinki,
right. The
and
Ken
filmed.
Russell
That's who made the
made.
Ken Russell made it. That's right. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I'm assuming the book isn't like the zany caper that Ken Russell
No,
makes out of it.
no, and the book is really interesting because the relationship between um, the narrator and Harvey Newbegin, who is the CIA operative, is very cloudy. And there's a
Mm,
sense at the end that actually, and they're kind of friends, they're frenemies, I suppose. But there's a sense at the end that the narrator actually pushes Newbegin underneath a bus to kill him. Um,
wow.
but also Funeral in Berlin, the second one, no, the third one, because Horse Under Wolf 2 wasn't made into a film. Um, that is basically set in Berlin, and Johnny Vulcan is this kind of operative, but he's someone with a Nazi past that he wants to cover up. So again, there's this kind of really interesting legacies of the kind of the Second World War generation, and of course, the Palmer character was a soldier in the Second World War. But it's interesting how often. So is it the Quiller memorandum, and there's the Odessa file, isn't there? And
Mm.
um, um, Helen McInnes did one as well. I think it's called the Salzburg something or other. Um, there are quite a few of them in which the legacies of Nazism start to have
The
a
Osterman
role.
weekend was
The
that
Austrian Weekend, yeah, that's Ludlam. Yeah,
Ludlam?
yeah, yeah. So there's an interesting thread of that, I think, and I think you're right here because it's so late. Von Glödis doesn't seem like he can't assume anything more than pasteboard kind of characteristics, but I think kind of Rivka, yeah, it really is a missed trick because that really would look towards the future, as you said about your own prime minister there in Italy.
And also you've got that thing about where it begins with these sort of military operations, and it feels really modern, and it's like, well, they're like the SAS
Yes,
essentially,
yeah, absolutely.
and they're assuming these characteristics of a modern fighting force rather than some sort of blitzkrieg, warlord feel of the Second World War. Um, and she's been trained by Mossad, which
Yeah,
which in the early 80s would also have this cachet to it that
yeah, absolutely.
obviously in very recent times has changed somewhat dramatically, but is is still going strong, even a few years ago, when you have something like Steven Spielberg's Munich, in which very much glamorizes the role of targeted assassination and Mossad
Yeah, yeah,
agents. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
yeah, they're troubled and everything, but at the same time,
But yeah, yeah,
don't they do? Yeah, it's just a little bit like the whole cycle of Vietnam films that were popular post Platoon, of sort of like, oh, it's terrible being in Vietnam, but don't we look good?
Yeah, and also kind of what Charlie Sheen says in his voiceover when he's in the helicopter at the end. It's really a war amongst ourselves. It's a war in our own hearts.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he's kind of, no, it isn't.
In a
You
way,
know.
the platoon were the friends we made along the way.
Yeah. Oh
The real
God.
platoon with the
The real
platoon
platoon.
was the
Yeah, the real
platoon.
platoon.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I find of all them films, the most the the couple that sort of stay with me the most are Brian De Palma's Casualties of War,
Hmm.
which is almost unwatchable because it's so it's because it's so bleak,
Yeah.
and Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket, which is disjointed and has its flaws, but still remains very visceral and very I mean, it has propaganda written into it by making its main character a a propagandist. you know?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, I've never been a big fan of Full Metal Jacket, as I'm sure you remember. But
Mm,
I find the kind of the Vietnam film I find most affecting, and it's not because of the Vietnam scenes, it's because of the home scenes. Is the Deer Hunter?
right, right.
You know, kind of the Pittsburgh scenes are, I think, are wonderfully done.
Mm,
Particularly the sequence before they go. But and there's this terrible shadow hanging over them, you know, that they know that, you know, they're all going to be conscripted and, you know, and all of that kind of thing. And I think that's, you know, and because it's so local in terms of the, you know, that they work at the plant and it's this kind of smallish town in the middle of America and they're just, yeah, they're just bodies.
mm.
And all that culture to do with the Orthodox Church and the specificities of who they are just gets lost in the machine, really. I think that for me that's really a really melancholy film. That opening bit. I mean, obviously the kind of the horribly racist kind of stuff in Vietnam
Mm.
is another thing entirely. But there's something very powerful, I think, about that. I think a lot of the even Born on the Fourth of July is a really interesting film. Coming
Mm.
Home's a really interesting film. Those kind of films are you know they're really powerful. I think.
Yeah, which sort of both. It's interesting because both of them sort of bookend almost that
Yes.
period because Born on the Fourth of July is probably the last of that cycle of Vietnam films, and to some degree is kind of like a corrective to Platoon. It's sort of like
Yeah. I agree, yeah.
you know this is what happened to the guys who were shot in the legs,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
ditto coming home because I mean if your subjectivity is changed by you know by your body if you get back and you're in one piece then you can you can deal with it to some degree, um even if internally there's other things going on, but if you're sort of if your body is affected then you've got that plus the psychological stuff, so it's you know yeah, I feel we're getting a little bit away from Icebreaker.
Yes. Let's move back. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
we've
Yeah.
we've
I
broken.
suppose I suppose with the kind of with the minefields and stuff, there is a sense that the land has history
Yes.
here, but because it's you know because it's a white space and we don't know the boundary lines particularly, it means that history is also kind of not exactly set aside, but it's a bit mixed up, isn't it? So we have the Winter
Mm,
War, we have the Cold War, we have von Glöda. It's almost as though there's a slightly different temporality at
mm,
work in this space. You know, Bond has got the gadgets, but really, no, but they're not really very kind of high tech. What he's got, and this could easily be a '60s set, you know, kind of narrative.
mm.
It would work perfectly well if this was set in 1964.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Well, I like the fact. I mean, you have the inevitable torture scene, and that's kind of well done, except for the fact that they do that thing of talking a big game and then just basically plunge him in very cold water, and so it's sort of like I can make you feel pain you've never felt before. Oh, you're unconscious.
yeah.
I guess I'm.
Hmm.
It reminds me of Christopher Nolan's Batman, where the Joker says, when you torture someone, don't hit them in the head because it disorients them. They're numb. That you're not actually, you're not going to get a clear answer. Um,
Well, in fact, kind of actual torturers in like North in the French in Algeria and stuff would actually beat the feet.
yeah, yeah,
That's the torture that they would actually use because then I mean that's agonizing, but also
yeah,
you don't pass out in the same way.
yeah.
Or like a film we saw together, The Devils, where
Oh,
he gets his
ouch.
legs broken,
Yeah.
and one of Ollie's most amazing performances, I think that. But yeah, no, it's interesting, isn't it? That well, I think that seems really well done actually, where
Mm,
Bond starts to escape into this kind of rather confused netherworld, where he doesn't
mm.
really know what he said, but then it's all mixed up with dream and the past and the summer, kind of by the seaside. I thought that was really really well handled actually.
Yeah.
Kind of better than the scene that was in License Renewed, which is actually quite short. And he does. There's a similar dreamlike quality here, but because this is extended, I think we do really get this sense of him drifting off into death, really. And he's very close to death here, and I thought it was, yeah, very effective.
It almost reminded me of Kingsley Amis's Colonel's Son as well. Has a torture scene which
Torture
is
scene,
quite extended and quite. It's just interesting that that becomes almost like a must-have in the novels. In a way that it isn't necessarily in the films, and you sometimes get it in the films, but often the torture scene is more like the Goldfinger laser or something like that, where it's some form of potential lethal force, which is then it's a circular saw that the conveyor belt is running towards. From the silent movies, it's some imminent danger that never occurs. Um,
I was
yeah,
going to ask you actually, how many of the novels can you remember do have these scenes of explicit torture where Bond is captured and tortured?
yeah. I mean, quite a few. Obviously, the Casino Royale one is the most
Yeah.
famous. Off the top of my head, does he get tortured? I mean, Live and Let Die, he gets dragged behind the boat for
Yes.
with the sharks. Uh, Thunderball, I think something. Oh, he has the rack, but that's kind of more an attempted murder as much
Right.
as anything. Um, I would hazard a guess that it's quite a few. I'd
Quite
guess it's
common.
more than half. I'd
Yeah, it's
reckon.
interesting, isn't it? Mm,
I'd reckon
yeah.
it's more than half. I wonder if From Russia with Love, no.
No.
Yeah, yeah. Moonraker, yes. I think there's some torture in Moonraker. I'm pretty sure he's strapped to a chair and hurt quite badly in Moonraker.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah. So I would say,
What do
I'd
you think the
say,
role of it is? What's the purpose of having these torture scenes as a very common structural device?
well, Ian Fleming liked spanking.
There's got to be more to it than that, though.
There is an element of sadomasochism. There is an
Yeah,
element
yeah, yeah.
of, he likes people getting tied up, and he likes the idea of restraint and pain. Um, I think there is the idea of the heroic, and the idea also there's that direct connection to the reader's experience. It's like when you read somebody writing about climbing Everest, and then you jump out of your hot toasty bed and pad across the floor in your bare feet. There's that you like that distance between yourself and a character. So if they're experiencing extremes of that nature, you can sort of pull the ripcord at any point, and it gives you
Mm.
a certain obnoxious pleasure. Uh, um, yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Well,
What would your the theatre of cruelty? What would be your
yeah, there is something to do with that, isn't there? There is something to do with it being a theatre. There's something spectacular or a spectacle of that. The fact that you, but there's also something to do with manliness, isn't there? Masculinity. The fact that kind
mm,
of in Casino Royale, it's an unknown, well, unnamed lower part of his body,
yeah.
which is below the chair, which then gets kind of whacked, um, like temple balls. It's there is something to do with endurance, isn't there? There's something to do with being able to take that extremity of pain, which kind of then because he's not the physically biggest, is he? He's not the kind of, but there is something to do with his capacity to take pain, which defines him in a way. Suffering is really, really important in the Bond character.
Yeah, I think that also gives him, I mean, more than the 007, that gives him the license to kill, doesn't it? So
Yes,
if
yes.
he endures pain, then he's allowed to, it's a little bit like suicide bombers. If you voluntarily say I'm willing to give my life away, then that gives you spiritual license to take other lives because you're not,
Yes.
as
Yes,
opposed,
that's interesting. Is it something kind of monkish about it? Considering his pre-epic kind of tendencies we've noticed earlier on, that kind of there is something to do with scarification, perhaps, that kind
Yeah,
of
but the
that the
priapic tendencies, as you mentioned, is sort of links to the sort of cult of the assassins. That you
okay,
do
yeah.
get the pleasure, you get your martinis, you get your marijuana and all the rest of it, as long as and then you go and kill people. You're
Yeah,
given
yeah.
these as almost like a holy, like reminds me of the 9/11 bombers all watching porn in their hotel rooms the night before.
Mm,
On September the
mm,
10th.
yeah.
It's sort of like we're going to do such a holy thing that we can indulge our sins.
But at the same
Um,
time, there is this kind of flagellatory quality to, kind of some of those scenes, isn't there? Where kind of, as you say, there's, the scarifying of the body, that kind
mm,
of is really, really important as a kind of testing moment that Bond has to pass through, and he does.
yeah,
Whereas other agents perhaps wouldn't, kind of he's able to kind of bear it in a way.
I think the Casino Royale, the film, that scene was used for. I mean, I think that scene was used very much as a sort of sadomasochistic
Mm,
sex scene between Mads
yeah, yeah.
Mikkelsen and Daniel Craig.
Mm,
Um, but it was also showing his Bond to be someone who could respond to pain with humor
mm.
in extremis, and that was really important. After he's tortured in Icebreaker, then we have the broken leg scene, and
The broken leg scene.
but there's something as well here, which is Paula rushing in and sort of uh, poor, sexy Rivka. Head disappearing in a mist of blood and
Blood
gore.
and bone.
Yeah.
The first of three. Um,
Number one.
number one.
Put it on the board. Put a name on the board.
Yeah, that's pretty extraordinary, that, isn't it? Yeah, we,
Yeah.
we saw we saw this in License Renewed, actually, didn't we? In the airplane at the end, where kind of it's very different. It's not clean at all here.
Mm.
It's not even her head; it's her face.
Right.
Her
Yeah.
face disappears. So kind of so it's really quite specific.
And it's sort of
Yeah,
like
that's
woman hath no fury.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
yes, yeah. No clean shot to the sternum. It's just her head disintegrates. Yeah, yeah. No, incredible, really. I mean, that's a really interesting scene, isn't it? Because right at that moment, the motivations are just so unclear. I mean, we kind of, I mean, like you, I sussed out that Rivka was a bad one. But who Paula is working for there is kind of like, what's going on? She shoots her, but for what reason? Kind of, yeah. So kind of, it's a, and Bond's, I think, kind of because we're aligned with Bond there, and he doesn't know whether to kind of go for Paula or what to think, really. Um,
I mean,
uh,
that's a little bit comical as well. That you sort of like it's kind of obvious, but at the same time, he's sort of like, what the
yeah,
what?
exactly. But Paula's shaking her head. Oh, come with me, James.
Well, and that's the role reversal, isn't it? I mean, I get the feeling
Yes.
throughout the last part of this book, but also at the beginning, that she's actually been out bonding Bond. That she's
Yeah,
been
absolutely.
I mean, she's the spy, and she's been shagging him as a sort of like, um, a bonus of her work. Yeah, I'll keep her close and squeeze him for the. He's so indiscreet. I usually get something out of him every
Yeah.
trip, and then I'll let him think he's in charge, but really, and then she rescues him. She gets, she bosses him around. She's the one with the associates who he
Yeah.
thinks, oh, your boyfriends are all a bit rough. They're all a bit ugly and mean
Yeah.
looking.
Yeah,
And she's like,
exactly.
yeah, but this is what you have to do in espionage, James. You
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
deal with
yeah.
people who are not nice, James. Poor James.
Yeah. Oh, he's just sitting there next round the campfire. Can I have a little bit of reindeer stew, please?
Yeah.
This is a bit
And
this is a bit too much for me. Can you can you book me the next flight home?
and I mean, this is all the way to them driving back in the Saab, where she's sort of saying, "Oh, I hope you're not too tired for sex, because I'm gonna I want some more of that before you go." And it's kind of like you get the feeling he's diminished
Yeah,
quite
exactly.
severely by the end of the book.
Oh, I've just been in an ice
Yeah,
bath.
yeah. I'm really, really
I've got a bit of a
unwell.
headache.
I'm really quite tired, Paula. It's like, I think an early night would be better. It's like
Starts rumming around in the glove box in case he's got anything in there that might help him.
Viagra hasn't been
He's got any
invented
Viagra
yet.
in him.
It's 1983, James. You're gonna have to wait a few years for that.
Oh dear. No, you're right though. He is diminished, isn't he? He kind of he's kind of transported, isn't he? He's taken off. He's literally rescued and delivered back home, really. Oh, and well, except for he suddenly decides to take charge, doesn't he? The kind of
Mm.
where when they get back to Helsinki with von Glöda.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you've had there's a great scene. I mean, we're skipping over it, but we don't necessarily have to do everything. But there's a great scene where the von Glöda sort of calls the MiGs in to bomb,
Oh man, yeah,
and I
yeah,
think that's I mean, in a way, that's a sort of Tom Clancy moment of sort of
right.
like absolute hardware hard-ons.
Yes, yeah, yeah,
You know.
yeah. That is an interesting moment, isn't it? And then, kind of course, von Glöda and Buxman arise somehow from the ashes, indestructible. But you're right that it does dwell over that scene quite a lot, doesn't it? These Sukhois coming in and fences and laying waste to the whole place. I suppose it's a kind of a different sense of power, isn't it?
Mm.
It really is the Iron Fist coming in and smashing, and it kind of so perhaps also shows that the Soviet Union isn't quite as palsied as they'd like to make out.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's not as feeble as you thought.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that yeah, and really is it's just at the call of a radio, isn't it? And in they come.
Don't
Um,
yeah, don't poke the bear, you know.
yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the last year of Brezhnev, isn't it? 83, and I think around in that time there was this sense that the Soviet Union was gerontocratic and you know wasn't as dynamic. It was much more, kind of the détente was ongoing at that particular point, even though it was Reagan. But I think that's an interesting moment. Yeah, I think it is an interesting moment where there is just this brute power available,
Mm, mm,
and not to be trifled with, as you say. Don't poke the bear.
absolutely, absolutely. So in terms of its reception, um, it doesn't get a great reception from it's been reviewed by the New York Times, deficient in many of the basic requirements. Mr. Gardner is all awkwardness.
That's a bit rude.
I think that's a bit harsh. The Times literary supplement is more positive, full of good action. His torture scenes are splendidly painful. His villain
Yeah.
is adequately megalomaniacal. Um, this is 1983. Though perhaps not sufficiently outre, his girls are pretty, sexy, and available.
Oh man.
And the courting routines are embarrassingly obvious as anything in the original. Uh, doesn't
Yeah.
really, yeah. So some,
Not mentioning the Nazis, interestingly.
no, no. There's some mention of it always goes back to Fleming and usually to to Gardner's detriment. But
Hmm.
there's a few that are very one of his best yet, and this is from the listener critic Marganita Lasky. And she writes that it has good good thriller value.
Hmm.
So I think there's some. I mean, I thought this was ranked as good, if not better. I think it's probably better than License Renewed. I think
Yeah,
it
I think so.
felt more sort of direct, and less, what's the word, sort of dissipated than like.
Yeah. I think as we talked about a little bit, and kind of in that pod. I mean, I always got the kind of sense from that book that Gardner was really grasping for the tone,
Mm,
and kind of parts of it seemed almost half send up. That there was a kind of not entirely serious, kind of take on it sometimes. Whereas there are bits of it which were really well in that book, but I thought this was just kind of much more. It was much tighter.
mm,
And in fact, the kind of the narrowness of the geographical thing really did play in its favor. It didn't have to have the kind of location hopping, kind of kind of apparatus. That this was kind of actually kind of that last, kind of that last kind of quotation that you read. This idea of it being a kind of a good thriller. I
mm.
think that's it, isn't it? It's it's not literary, but it works well as a kind of a strong thriller read, I think, really.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the things that we've criticized it for, or we've discussed, not sure if we've necessarily criticized it, but in terms of sort of James Bond's clumsiness and his role as more bait than anything else, is actually entirely consistent with Fleming's conception, because you can go through all of the original Fleming books and find Bond making mistake after mistake after mistake. He's not he's kind of not the super spy of popular imagination. It's a little bit like, reading the original Tarzan books and finding he doesn't swing on a rope, just like,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, the thing that's in my head as his most famous attribute, he doesn't. Or, reading the original Sherlock Holmes, actually, that's a better comparison.
Yes.
And finding he doesn't wear a deerstalker
Yes, look at
hat,
that.
you know.
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's I think that's really interesting. That kind of the idea that Bond is not quite as in control, is never as in control as he is in the films. That
mm,
in the Fleming conception of him, that there's always this kind of sense that he's there to be a catalyst for action.
mm.
He's there to kind of prod things about and sometimes blunder about necessarily. But that's spycraft, isn't it? I think that's much more, that puts it much closer to other kind of espionage writers where there are so many things going on that in a sense, basically what you do is to kind of have to create some kind of dynamic action, and that then reveals to you much more about the lie of the land than it would do if you just tried to kind of figure it out cerebrally. It's a way of unlocking the kind of the narrative components in a way.
I mean, and that's where Le Carre comes in, because he's
Yeah.
showing that in order to be a perfect spy, to quote one of his titles, you have to relinquish your humanity, and
Mm.
that ultimately the thing is, there's no one can be the perfect spy because everyone's a human being, and so you're always going to retain some aspect of yourself which will, which will give yourself away, give the game up.
That's interesting, isn't it? That Smiley, kind of the last illusion of the illusionless man, kind of
Mm,
that in effect that is really what helps him understand others. That's what makes him a brilliant spy, is literally that blind spot,
mm,
which I
mm.
think is why Tinker Tailor is such a brilliant novel. Is that kind of it revolves around his flaw, but literally his flaw is what enables him to be who he is.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, exactly, exactly. Wow. So, oh, okay. So I think that's taken us around the houses
yeah.
pretty exhaustively. Hopefully not exhaustingly.
No, it's been. I think it just shows. I suppose. I mean, how many Gardner novels are there? There's quite a few, isn't there?
It's about
Um,
6 or 7, I think, or maybe more.
I think there's more than that. Yeah,
Okay.
2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16.
Good Lord. Out
Yeah,
by 10.
yeah. but but
Me at 10.
but he shows. But I think by the time you get to this third one, that he's beginning to get a handle on it.
Yeah.
And kind of and he's turning Bond into more of his, rather than it being something which is a little bit more pastiche perhaps, or he's struggling to quite get it right. He's kind of got more of a set of a sense of things. But I think it's a good read.
That's a massive investment of a writer's career and
Yeah, it
time.
is.
That's essentially saying, okay, this is what I'm going to be known for. Now I'm going to do these and some others.
He wrote them through to 96. His last one was called Cold, 1996. So 15 years. So,
I'd be kind of interested to read the last one now as as
mm,
sort of like the beginning and the end. I'm
yeah,
not
absolutely.
necessarily wanting to read the whole lot, but
No.
come on, Bri, we could do it, man. Let's go back to number two and just
Number two for special services. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, look,
which
that doesn't
does.
seem quite so much of a chore as it might have seemed to me after the first one, as we said.
Wait a minute, how many of the titles do you think you could find on a little card inside a London phone box? Icebreaker for special services.
Oh man, yeah, yeah. It is funny. I mean, as I said earlier on as well, he's got a funny way with names as well. You know, kind of
Mm,
Arna to dear. That doesn't sound very Finnish to me, but there we go.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. One presumes that there's that he's talking to people from the, you know, from the area. I mean,
Perhaps.
he's written loads of novels. What am I? There's he must have written about 30 or 40 novels. This guy.
Oh yeah, yeah,
He's
yeah. But
written
yeah,
three Professor Moriarty novels, an autobiography he wrote in 1964 called "Spin the Bottle." It's a good title. Um, let's see
he
what
wrote
his.
eight novels from Boise Oaks, which was like a parody spy kind of novel. He wrote eight of them before
Right.
1975. So yeah, so kind of yeah, he's incredibly prolific. But I suppose it's kind of as we said with Fleming that he's a professional writer, isn't he? He
Mm,
kind of he has a kind of sense of what he wants to do. It's not particularly long, is it? It's about 230 odd pages. You can kind of rip through it fairly easily,
mm,
but it works as a kind of commercial fiction.
yeah, yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, some of the titles are not the best titles, though. It has to be said. No Deals, Mr. Bond has to be the laziest title of a Bond book ever. No Deals, Mr. Bond. Come on, come on.
Mind you,
They
win, lose or die kind of comes. That's kind of a bingo card version, isn't it,
n-
of a Bond title as well.
never send flowers. I mean, that's just not even. It doesn't even sound like it's in the wheelhouse. Is that something Bond is famous for? He never sends flowers. It's got an allergy. He prefers a donation to a charity of his choice.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, these have the. I mean, they don't have the cleverness of a Fleming. You know,
No,
there's no real play on words or anything like that. Death is forever, for instance, is like a truism rather than a.
yeah.
You know, no, it's not.
Well, I mean, it's just that kind of, the slightly kind of witty, but kind of, I suppose, the striking quality of Fleming's titles. It shows how hard that is,
Yeah,
because
yeah. Even the Daniel Craig, once they ran out of Fleming titles, you know, Spectre, No Time to Die is an awful title.
it is. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Quantum of Solace was hilariously parodied by Joe and Adam and
Yes,
Joe on
right.
Radio 6. You know,
Yeah. No, I suppose that kind of that Fleming flavour there is quite difficult to imitate, isn't it?
they've
Um,
got bags of solace. I don't want them. All I want is a little quantum.
there we go. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Bri, it's been a lot of fun talking to you. I think it's been more fun talking to you than, than reading the book, to tell you the truth. The book was good, though. I would recommend Icebreaker. It's definitely an improvement on License Renewed, and which I think I was more positive about than you were anyway. I think that so I would say Gardner. I'm interested in if I were to read one more, it would be the very last one.
Yeah, I think that would be an interesting thing. Yeah,
But I'd love to have you on to talk perhaps about the William Boyd Bond novels solo.
that would be marvelous. Must be very different to the tone of Gardner.
Yeah, for to begin with, it goes back to the 60s.
Yeah, yeah,
So
that's lovely. So yeah,
period
no, I look
piece.
forward to that.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much, Bri.
Thank you.